INTRO, 3 disturbing true summer camp horror stories. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post stories like this online. I've always been the quiet one, the friend who doesn't believe in ghost stories or urban legends, the one who rolls their eyes when someone swears they heard footsteps in the woods. But what happened to me, and to people I knew, wasn't some creepy campfire tale. It wasn't a shadow in the corner or a trick of the light. It was real. And even now, years later, I still can't shake the feeling that something is unfinished. Like part of me never left those woods. Like part of me is still waiting for the moment when it all happens again. Summer camp was supposed to be fun. That's what they told us. It was supposed to be about swimming in the lake, roasting marshmallows, making lifelong friends under the stars. And it was, at least at first. But no one warned us about the other things. No one warned us about the counselor who disappeared, or the night the screams came from the lake, or the boy who shouldn't have been in cabin 13. I've tried to forget. Believe me, I've tried. But some stories don't stay buried, and maybe they shouldn't. So tonight, I'm finally telling mine. Here are 3 disturbing true stories from summer camp. I'll start with the one that still keeps me up at night. The counselor's cabin. I wasn't supposed to be at Camp Blackwood that summer. It wasn't my first choice, or even my second. But my mom insisted I needed to get out of the house. Said I'd been moping around too much after my breakup, wasting the summer scrolling through my phone. I'd never been a camp kind of kid. I wasn't into hiking, or kayaking, or singing dumb songs around a fire. But I told myself, it's just 2 weeks, and then I'd be home again. Back in my room, back to normal. I had no idea that normal was something I'd never get back. Camp Blackwood was one of those old camps that had been around for decades, maybe longer. The sign at the entrance was all weathered wood and peeling paint, like something out of a movie. The cabins were small and cramped, arranged in messy rows around a central field. My counselor's name was Jake. He couldn't have been more than 20, but to us 14-year-olds, he might as well have been 30. He had shaggy brown hair, a permanent tan, and that fake camp enthusiasm that made him seem like a cartoon character. "All right, guys," he shouted as we dragged our duffels into the cabin. "Welcome to Cabin 9. This is your home for the next 2 weeks. Let's get unpacked and then head to the mess hall for orientation." The other kids groaned. I did too, quietly. My bunk was near the window, facing the woods. From that spot, I could see another cabin a few dozen yards away, half hidden by trees. That was the first time I noticed the old cabin. It didn't look like the others. While ours were freshly painted and had glass windows, this one was darker, older, sagging at the roofline. The door looked warped, hanging slightly open. "Hey, Jake," I asked, pointing. "What's that cabin over there?" Jake followed my gaze and stiffened, just for a second. Then he smiled again. "Ah, that one? That's just storage. No one's used it in years." Something in his voice sounded rehearsed, like he'd answered that question before. But before I could press him, he clapped his hands. "Let's move. Mess hall's waiting." I let it go, for the moment. Dinner was the usual camp slop: mystery meat, overcooked pasta, something green that no one touched. Afterward, they gathered us around a big bonfire for orientation. A lady named Sue told us the rules: no swimming without a lifeguard, no wandering past the trails, lights out at 10. But while Sue talked, I noticed Jake sitting apart from the other counselors. He kept glancing over his shoulder, toward the woods, toward that old cabin. That night, lying in my bunk, I stared out the window again. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting shadows across the clearing, and there it was, the cabin, still, silent. Except, I swear I saw a light flicker inside. Just for a second. A faint orange glow, like the flame of a lighter, then nothing. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the moon. Maybe someone had gone in to grab something from storage, like Jake said. but something inside me didn't buy it. The next day, camp life went on like normal. We played kickball, hiked up the ridge, did archery. I almost forgot about the cabin until free time that afternoon. A few of us were sitting by the flagpole, swapping stories. That's when one kid, Ethan, brought it up. "You guys know about the old counselor's cabin, right?" he asked, lowering his voice. I perked up. "What about it?" Ethan leaned closer. "They say a counselor used to live there years ago, before they built the new cabins, but something happened." "What do you mean?" another kid asked. "They don't tell the campers, but my older brother came here like 5 years ago. He said one summer, a counselor just disappeared, like vanished in the middle of the night. They searched the whole camp, the woods, everything. Never found him." "That's not true," another kid scoffed. "I'm serious," Ethan insisted. "After that, they stopped using the cabin, locked it up. But sometimes, at night, people say they see lights in there." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I wanted to laugh it off, call it a dumb campfire story, but I'd seen that flicker of light. And I knew Ethan wasn't making it up. That evening, I cornered Jake after dinner. "Hey," I said quietly, "why don't they tear down that cabin?" He frowned. "What cabin?" "You know, the old one by the woods." He hesitated. It's part of the camp's history. They keep it for sentimental reasons." I narrowed my eyes. "Jake, last night, I saw someone in there." His face paled. "No, you didn't." "I did." I insisted. "There was a light." Jake shook his head, backing away. "Stay away from that cabin. Do you hear me?" "Why?" Just trust me, okay?" His voice cracked a little. "Promise me." I didn't promise. I couldn't. Because that night, lying in my bunk, staring out the window, I saw the light again. And this time, it didn't flicker and fade. This time, it stayed on. A soft, steady glow behind the broken glass. And as I watched, frozen, I saw a silhouette move past the window.
2. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure in the window of the old cabin, standing there, perfectly still, silhouetted against the flickering light. It didn't move. It didn't wave. It just watched. I stayed frozen in my bunk, gripping my blanket like it could protect me. I don't know how long I stared, but at some point, exhaustion pulled me under. When I woke up, the sun was already high, and the cabin window was empty again. No light, no figure, like it had never happened. But I knew what I'd seen, and I wasn't the only one. At breakfast, Ethan sat down across from me, his face pale. "Dude," he whispered, "you saw it too, didn't you?" I hesitated. "Saw what?" "The cabin, the light." I swallowed. "Yeah." He leaned closer. "I watched it last night. There was someone inside." I felt a chill crawl up my neck. "What did they look like?" "I couldn't tell," Ethan said. "Just a shape, like they were pacing back and forth." I frowned. "I only saw them once, just standing there." He shook his head. "No, they were moving." That made my stomach twist, because if Ethan was right, whoever or whatever was in that cabin hadn't just been standing there watching. They'd been waiting. That day, everything at camp felt off. Jake seemed distracted, flinching every time someone mentioned the woods. The other counselors avoided looking toward the old cabin. Even Sue, the camp director, told us during lunch that we were to stay clear of any off-limits structures. No one said the cabin's name, but we all knew. That afternoon, during free swim, I found Jake sitting alone by the dock, staring at the treeline. I walked over, heart pounding. "Jake," I said quietly, "please, tell me what's going on." He didn't look at me, just kept staring. "It's nothing," he muttered, "just an old story. You shouldn't worry about it." "I saw someone," I pressed. "Ethan saw them too, in the cabin." At that, Jake's jaw tightened. "You didn't see anything." "Jake," Please. He finally turned to me, eyes tired. Listen to me, kid. Stay away from that cabin, if you know what's good for you. I didn't understand why he was being so cagey, but I could tell he wasn't just scared for himself. He was scared for us. That night, after lights out, I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling. Ethan was asleep across the room. The other boys snored softly. But outside, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching through the gravel. They stopped outside our cabin. I held my breath. The footsteps moved again, toward the old cabin. I climbed out of bed and tiptoed to the window, peered through the glass, and froze. A flashlight beam danced across the grass. Someone was walking toward the cabin's door, tall, broad-shouldered. Jake! I watched as he approached the cabin, paused at the threshold, then slowly pushed the door open. The flashlight beam vanished inside. And then, silence. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. The door never closed. Jake never came back out. I didn't know what to do. Wake the other boys? Run to the main lodge? But something deep in my gut told me not to leave. So I sat there, trembling, watching the dark doorway, hoping, praying that any second, Jake would reappear. He didn't. And then, the light inside the cabin flickered on. Not Jake's flashlight. A different light, dim, orange. And just like before, a figure moved past the window. Except this time, it wasn't Jake's silhouette. It was taller, thinner, and it didn't pace back and forth. It stood there, watching me. I stumbled back from the window, heart hammering in my chest, crawled into my bunk and pulled the blanket over my head. I don't know how long I hid there, maybe hours, maybe minutes. At some point, I must have drifted off. Because when I woke up, the sun was up, birds chirped outside. The old cabin looked empty again. Jake was gone. When I asked Sue where he was, she gave me a tight smile. He had to leave early, she said. Family emergency. But I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes. And that night, after lights out, as I lay in my bunk, I saw the cabin's light flicker on again. And this time, there were two silhouettes in the window.
We played kickball, hiked up the ridge, did archery. The next morning, Jake still hadn't come back. His bed in the counselor's cabin was untouched. His clipboard was still on the nightstand. His duffel bag sat in the corner, half-zipped. But when I asked about him again, Sue just repeated the same line, family emergency. I tried asking the other counselors. They just shrugged and avoided eye contact. Ethan was the only one who believed me. Dude, he whispered as we sat by the flagpole. He never left. I nodded. I know. We both stared toward the woods, where the old cabin loomed, half hidden in the shadows. I think Ethan hesitated. I think something's in there. I didn't disagree. That afternoon, during arts and crafts, I slipped away. Ethan followed without a word. We grabbed flashlights from the supply shed and made our way toward the tree lean. The air felt heavier there, quieter, like the birds had stopped singing. The closer we got, the more wrong everything felt. The cabin's door still hung open. The inside was dark, silent. We stopped a few feet away. You sure about this? Ethan asked. No, I admitted. But I stepped forward anyway. The floorboards creaked under my sneakers. The smell hit me immediately, musty wood, old smoke, something metallic underneath. We swept our flashlights around. Inside, the cabin was empty, bare walls, a broken chair in the corner, a pile of old blankets, and something else. Look, Ethan whispered. In the middle of the floor was a shallow pit, maybe 4 feet wide, lined with old stones, like a fire pit, except there were no ashes. Only dirt, and something sticking out of it. I knelt down, heart thudding, and brushed the dirt away with trembling hands. It was a shoe. A man's shoe. Jake's shoe. I stumbled back, choking on my breath. Oh my God. Ethan backed toward the door. We need to tell someone. Now! But before we could move, a noise behind us. A slow, scraping sound. We spun around, flashlights darting. And there, in the doorway, was Sue. At first, I was relieved. "Sue," I shouted. "Jakes, put the lights down," she said softly. There was something strange in her voice. Calm, too calm. "We found. Put them down." Her hand moved behind her back. When it came forward again, she was holding something. A knife. Not a kitchen knife. Bigger. Rusted. "Back away from the pit," she said. My throat went dry. "Sue, what's going on?" She stepped inside. I told him not to snoop. I told him to leave it alone. "Jake?" Ethan asked shakily. Sue's eyes hardened. "Jake thought he could fix it, but you can't fix what's broken." She moved closer. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. Sue's lips twitched. "Someone has to feed it." My blood ran cold. "Feed what?" She laughed, soft and bitter. "You really think camps like this stay open on tuition alone?" She lunged. We bolted. I don't remember how we made it back through the woods. Branches whipped my face. Rocks tore my shoes. We burst into the main lodge, gasping for air. The other counselors stared at us, confused. But when I pointed toward the woods, screaming that Sue had tried to kill us, they just looked away. Like they already knew. Like they'd always known. That night, I didn't sleep. And when I looked out the cabin window, toward the old building in the woods, the light was back. Steady. Orange. And I swear, in the flickering glow, I saw 3 silhouettes standing at the window. Watching. Waiting. And I knew Jake wasn't the last. And we wouldn't be either. Not at Camp Blackwood. Not in the counselor's cabin. I didn't want to go back to Camp Echo. The first time I went, I was 8 years old. I don't remember much from that summer, just flashes. The smell of pine needles, the sting of mosquito bites, the sound of kids laughing as they jumped off the dock into the lake. But I remembered the lake. And more importantly, I remembered the screams. When I told my parents I didn't want to go back, they waved it off. "Don't be silly," my dad said. "You loved it last time." But I hadn't. And now, 6 years later, they were sending me again, this time for 2 full weeks. I tried to tell myself it would be different. I was older, tougher. I wouldn't get spooked by silly stories. But the second the bus pulled up to the camp gates, and I saw the lake glittering through the trees, I felt that same hollow pit open in my stomach. Something was wrong with that lake. And I wasn't the only one who knew it. The first day was normal enough. We got assigned to cabins. I ended up in cabin 4, with a bunch of other 14-year-olds. My counselor's name was Alex. He was friendly enough, but there was something tired in his eyes, like he hadn't slept well in a while. That night, we all gathered around the campfire for stories. It didn't take long for the lake to come up. "There's a reason they don't let us swim after dark," one of the older boys said, poking the fire with a stick, "because at night, she comes out." "Who's she?" someone asked. He grinned. "The lady in the lake." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, come on, that's so cliche." "No, seriously," he insisted. "Ask any of the counselors. They've heard it too. Sometimes at night, if you're real quiet, you can hear her screaming." I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, something clenched in my chest. Because I had heard it 6 years ago. And now, I was back. That night, I lay awake in my bunk, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the crickets chirped, the wind rustled the trees. And then, a scream. High, distant, echoing across the water. I bolted upright, heart pounding. Ethan, the same kid from my old cabin, somehow back here too, sat up across from me, his face pale in the moonlight. "You heard that too?" he whispered. I nodded, throat dry. We sat there, listening. Another scream, closer this time. But it wasn't like an animal. It wasn't human, either. It sounded broken, like someone trying to scream underwater. The next morning, no one talked about it. I pulled Alex aside after breakfast. "There were screams last night," I said quietly, "by the lake." He stiffened. "It's just animals, coyotes, maybe." "That wasn't a coyote," I told him. He sighed. "Look, there's a lot of stories about this place. Most of them are old legends. Don't let them get in your head." But he didn't meet my eyes when he said it. And I noticed something else. When the campers went swimming that afternoon, Alex didn't go near the water. He stood at the tree lean, arms crossed, watching. Like he was guarding something. Or waiting for something to come out. The next few days passed in a blur. Every morning, we woke up to the sound of the bell clanging outside the cabins. Every afternoon, we swam in the lake under the watchful eyes of the counselors. Every evening, we sat around the fire, pretending we weren't all silently counting down the days until we could go home. But at night, the screaming came back. It never sounded at the same time. Sometimes it started just after lights out. Sometimes not until 2 or 3 in the morning, but it always came from the lake. And every night, it sounded closer. By the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat up in bed, pulled on my sneakers, and slipped outside. Ethan followed without a word. He didn't even ask where we were going. He knew. The air was cold and damp. The path down to the lake was slick with dew. We stopped at the tree lean, just before the sand started. The lake was glassy and still, reflecting the moon like a sheet of silver. And then, a ripple. Something moved beneath the surface. "Do you see that?" Ethan whispered. I nodded, mouth dry. A pale shape drifted just below the water, slow, smooth. And then, as we watched, it surfaced. Ahead. Just for a second. A flash of pale skin, wet hair clinging to a face. And then it slipped back under. The scream that followed was louder than anything we'd heard before. It rattled in my chest like thunder. And it wasn't coming from far away. It was coming right in front of us. We bolted back up the path, tripping over roots and rocks. By the time we reached the cabin, we were gasping for breath. "What the hell was that?" Ethan hissed, pressing his back against the door. "I don't know," I said, voice shaking. But deep down, I did. I'd seen it once before. 6 years ago. And now, whatever it was, it remembered me. The next morning, I cornered Alex again. "You need to tell me the truth," I said, "about the lake." He rubbed his face, looking more tired than ever. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" He hesitated. "People drown every year. Kids, counselors, even staff. And sometimes," he trailed off. "Sometimes what?" He swallowed. "Sometimes, they don't stay gone." I stared at him. "You're saying it's a ghost?" He shook his head. "No, nothing like that. But there's something about this place. Something under the water. It's like, it pulls people in, and it doesn't let go." "Why does no one shut the camp down?" I demanded. "Money," Alex said bitterly. "Parents don't believe the stories. The owners cover it up. The missing kids get blamed on accidents, but everyone who works here knows." He leaned closer. "Don't go near the water at night. Ever." That evening, the camp director called a meeting. "Everyone needs to stay inside tonight," she announced. "No exceptions." When someone asked why, she just said there'd been an incident. But no one explained what kind. That night, the screams didn't come from the lake. They came from the woods. I didn't sleep, neither did Ethan. We lay in our bunks, listening as the counselors whispered outside. At one point, we heard a radio crackle. Someone said a name we didn't recognize. Then another voice replied, "He never made it back." I didn't know who they were talking about, but I had a sinking feeling it wasn't the first time that conversation had happened here. And it wouldn't be the last. The next day, they canceled swimming. When I asked why, Alex just looked at the lake, his face pale. They haven't found him yet. Who? Marcus, he said quietly, one of the lifeguards. He went out last night. I stared at the empty dock. The lifeguard chair tipped over on its side. The water calm, silent, unmoving. He's not coming back, is he? I asked. Alex didn't answer. That night, they posted extra counselors around the cabins. I watched them from the window, standing in pairs, flashlights in hand, talking in low voices. But it didn't make me feel safer, because none of them were looking at the lake. They were watching the woods, like they were afraid of something coming from the shore. I tried to sleep, but every sound made me flinch. A branch snapping, a gust of wind rattling the window. And then, I heard it. A scream. But this time, it wasn't distant. It wasn't echoing across the lake. It was just outside the cabin. I sat up, hard hammering. Ethan was already awake, wide-eyed. "What the hell?" he started, but I cut him off. "Did you lock the door?" He nodded. Another scream, closer. Then footsteps. Slow, crunching gravel. And then something tapped the window. I froze. Slowly, I turned my head. A hand pressed against the glass. Pale, wet, fingers splayed wide. A face appeared behind it. Eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Marcus! The missing lifeguard. But something was wrong. His skin looked bloated. His lips were blue. His hair hung in dripping clumps across his face. And behind him, something moved in the darkness. Something dragged him backward. His fingers slid down the glass, leaving wet streaks. And then he was gone, swallowed by the night. I scrambled to the door, threw the bolt. "We have to tell someone." Ethan grabbed my arm. "No one's gonna believe us. We can't stay here," I hissed. "Where are we supposed to go?" I didn't know, but I couldn't stay in that cabin, waiting for whatever took Marcus to come back. We waited until the counselors rotated their watch. Then we slipped out the back, running low along the path. The moonlit lake stretched out ahead of us, glassy and calm. The dock jutted into the water like a finger pointing into the dark. We weren't heading for the dock. We were heading for the road. But halfway there, we heard it. The scream. But this time, it wasn't from the woods. It wasn't from the lake. It was behind us. We spun around and saw Sue. She stood in the path, flashlight in hand, face pale and drawn. "You boys need to come with me," she said quietly. "We're leaving," I shot back. "We're going home." "There's no way out tonight," she said. "You can't be out here. Not now." Ethan stepped forward. "What's happening?" Sue looked past us, toward the lake. "Every few years," she said, voice hollow, "it wakes up. It calls someone. And if it doesn't get who it wants, it takes more." I stared at her. "Marcus?" She nodded. "He went down to the dock last night. Said he heard someone calling his name. We tried to stop him. But you couldn't," Ethan whispered. "No one ever can," Sue said. The wind shifted, and across the water, a ripple, a shape, something just beneath the surface. Sue grabbed our shoulders. "Go back to the cabins. Lock the doors. Stay away from the windows." "What about you?" I asked. She gave a tired smile. "Someone has to watch the water." And then she turned, walked down the path, toward the dock, toward the lake. And as we watched, her silhouette grew smaller against the moonlit water. until she was just a shadow at the end of the dock. And then, she stepped off. The next morning, they found her shoes on the boards. No one said a word at breakfast. When the buses came early that afternoon, no one asked why. The lake was still, calm, like nothing had ever happened. But I swear, as we drove away, I looked back. And in the shallows, just beneath the surface, I saw a pale face watching me. Mouth open in a silent scream. And then it disappeared. Like it had never been there at all.
When I first signed up to be a camp counselor, I thought it would be an easy summer. Spend a couple months outdoors, hang out with kids, get a paycheck. I needed the money for college, and besides, how hard could it be? Turns out, it was harder than I expected. Not because of the kids, but because of what happened in Cabin 13. Camp Hollow Pines wasn't a big camp. We had 12 cabins for the boys, 12 for the girls, arranged in 2 loops on either side of the mess hall. The numbering went from 1 to 12 on both sides. But there was another cabin, set farther back, near the tree line. Cabin 13. It wasn't on the official map. It wasn't listed on the counselor assignments. But it was there. I noticed it my second day on the job. While I was walking back from the archery range, through the trees, I saw a small building, half hidden by brush. The roof sagged. The door hung crooked on its hinges. At first, I thought it was a shed. Until I saw someone sitting on the steps. A kid. He looked about 10 or 11, pale, thin, wearing a camp t-shirt a few sizes too big. He sat perfectly still, hands resting on his knees, staring straight ahead. I paused, squinting through the trees. He didn't move, didn't blink. "Hey, kid," I called, "you okay?" He didn't answer. Just sat there, watching. I made my way through the underbrush, closer. "What are you doing out here? You're not supposed to be back this way." Still no response. When I was maybe 20 feet away, he finally turned his head and smiled. Not a big smile, just a tiny curl of his lips. Then he stood up and walked into the cabin. I hurried forward, pushing branches aside. "Hey, wait up." But when I reached the door, the cabin was empty. The room was bare, no furniture, no bunk beds, no gear. Just dust and footprints in the dirt, leading toward the back wall. And stopping there, I told the head counselor, Mark, what I'd seen. He frowned. "There's no Cabin 13, he said. "I saw it," I insisted. "There was a kid sitting outside." Mark sighed. "That's just an old maintenance shed. No one's used it in years." It wasn't empty, I told him. There were footprints inside, and a kid went in there. Mark's jaw tightened. "Stay away from it." "Why?" He didn't answer. That night, as I made my rounds before lights out, I passed the mess hall and caught a glimpse of the tree line. A figure stood at the edge of the woods. Small, still, watching. I couldn't shake the image of that kid standing at the edge of the woods. When I turned to look again, he was gone. Just trees, darkness. But I knew I'd seen him. That night, lying in my bunk, I stared up at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the other counselors settling in. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it wasn't even the same kid. Maybe it was a camper who'd gotten lost, or a prank. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The next day, I tried asking around. "You ever hear about Cabin 13? I asked another counselor, Matt, as we walked toward the dining hall. He froze. "What did you just say?" "Cabin 13, I repeated, by the tree line. Looks abandoned, but I saw a kid sitting on the steps." Matt shook his head quickly. "There's no Cabin 13. I'm telling you." "Stop," he snapped. "You didn't see anything. Forget it." He walked away, leaving me standing alone. That afternoon, during swim time, I noticed something else. The boy was back. Sitting on the dock this time, feet dangling over the water. No one else seemed to see him. The lifeguard didn't call him in. The other kids splashed nearby, oblivious. I started toward him, calling his name, though I didn't know it. "Hey, you're not supposed to be down there alone." But before I could reach the dock, he slipped into the water. I sprinted the last few yards, heart pounding. "Hey, wait." But when I got there, the water was calm. Clear. No ripples. No bubbles. No boy. I stood there for a long time, scanning the surface, waiting for his head to pop up. Nothing. Finally, the lifeguard came over. "Everything okay?" "There was a kid," I said breathlessly. "He went under. He hasn't come back up." The lifeguard frowned. "Where?" I pointed. "Right here, sitting on the dock. I saw him slip in." He scanned the water. "All the kids are accounted for." "What?" He gestured to the other campers, gathered in a group by the shallow end. "Counts good. No one's missing." "But I saw." "Maybe you saw a fish," he said gently. "It happens. The lake messes with your eyes sometimes." I stared back at the water. But I knew what I'd seen. And it wasn't a fish. That night, I dreamed of footsteps outside my cabin. Slow, crunching gravel. A knock at the door. I sat up in bed, sweating. The knock came again. I swung my legs over the edge of the bunk, heart racing. "Hello?" No answer. I crept toward the door. Another knock. I pressed my eye to the crack between the boards. And saw him. Standing just outside. Barefoot, wet. Staring at the door. I jerked awake. The room was dark. The knock still echoed in my ears. But the door was still. No footsteps. No boy. I wiped the sweat from my face, heart still hammering. A dream. It had to be a dream. Didn't it?
The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept checking the tree line every chance I got, scanning the dock, watching the paths between the cabins. But the boy didn't show himself again. It was like he disappeared. But I knew better. I knew he was still here, somewhere, watching. That night, I stayed up after lights out, sat on the cabin steps, flashlight resting in my lap, staring into the dark woods. And just before midnight, I saw him, standing at the edge of the trees. Still, silent, watching me. I stood up slowly. "Hey," I called softly. "Who are you?" He didn't answer, didn't move. But then, he lifted one arm and pointed toward the path leading deeper into the woods, toward cabin 13. I hesitated. Every nerve in my body told me not to follow. But I stepped forward anyway. The boy turned and walked ahead, disappearing into the trees. I followed. Branches scraped my arms. The flashlight beam bounced wildly with every step. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No crickets, no wind, just silence. And then, cabin 13. Exactly where I'd seen it before. Dark, sagging, door hanging open. The boy stood on the steps, watching me, waiting. I approached slowly. "What's in there?" I asked. He tilted his head and smiled again. The same small, unsettling smile. Then he turned and walked inside. I hesitated at the threshold, raised my flashlight. Inside, the cabin looked the same. Empty, bare walls, dust. But in the far corner, a trapdoor, slightly ajar. The boy stood next to it, pointing down. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not going down there." The boy's smile widened. He stepped onto the trapdoor and slowly sank into it, like the floor swallowed him. And then he was gone. I backed away, turned to run. But standing in the doorway, Mark, the head counselor. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. I froze. I followed him. Followed who? "The boy," I said. He went inside. "There's a trapdoor." Mark's face darkened. "You weren't supposed to see this." "What's under there, Mark?" He stepped closer. Go back to your cabin. I shook my head. Not until you tell me. Mark sighed heavily. Every few summers, he said quietly, we lose a kid. My stomach dropped. What? They wander off. They don't come back. We search. We post flyers. We tell the parents we're sorry. He looked past me, at the trapdoor. But somehow, we always end up here. I followed his gaze. What's down there? I whispered. Mark didn't answer. He just walked past me, knelt beside the trapdoor, and slowly pulled it open. Darkness yawned beneath. A faint smell drifted up, damp earth, mildew, something metallic underneath. Mark looked at me over his shoulder. Go back, he said again. Then he swung his legs over the edge and disappeared into the dark. I didn't follow. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my cabin, bolting the door behind me. The next morning, Mark was gone. The other counselors said he'd gone home early, family emergency. But I knew better. I knew he hadn't left. Not really. And when I looked out the cabin window, toward the tree line, I saw the boy, sitting on the steps of cabin 13, watching, waiting, and smiling. I never went back to Camp Hollow Pines. But sometimes, late at night, I dream about that cabin. And in my dream, I see the boy standing in the doorway, still waiting. And every time I wake up, I swear I hear footsteps outside my door. Slow, steady, getting closer.